less true for us in the church, wanting to keep our children safe and our teachers safe. So we put together this webinar. The deans also expressed that pastors and families are in an extended period of stress as a result of the pandemic, and that stress is increased by online school or going back to school in person or the hybrid system, and how does that work, and who remembers what day Joey's supposed to go and then stay home, and what day Maya's supposed to go and then stay home. So there's a lot of concern and more pressure on people. So we put together a webinar to help address some of those in terms of how you can help your children, help the kids in your congregations, help your nursery schools to be safe places where growth can continue. And the best news is we got two of the best people to talk to you tonight, and I'm really delighted about that. The woman who is currently in my upper left-hand corner of the screen is Synodical Deacon Nancy Schoener. Nancy and I go back about 24 years. Nancy is a member of Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Pleasantville, where I was the pastor. She's also a nurse practitioner and the director of infection control and employee health at Calvary Hospital in the Bronx. She gave a presentation recently with a question and answer period for the Lutheran Schools Association at the end of August to provide guidance to them as they open schools. And she will address some actions for your opening of schools and your own Christian education programs, Sunday school, nursery schools in our churches. And all of these guidelines that Nancy is going to share with you, all of her advice come from her own experience as an infectious disease control person, and her extensive familiarity with the guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control and New York State regulations. And then our other presenter tonight, I also know for quite some time, Janet Siry is a licensed clinical social worker. She's a member of Trinity Lutheran Church in Rocky Point. She has her own private practice and provides counseling services through the Lutheran Counseling Center. She has her bachelor's degree in elementary education, has worked as a preschool teacher, and is a school-based social worker. So Janet brings with her lots of experience in school concerns, and will address the emotional toll that the stress of the current environment and the desire to get back to school, socialization presents to children and parents alike as they get into this current academic year. So we're very delighted that in our own Lutheran family, we have two women with such tremendous expertise. Each will present for about 30 minutes. Their presentations will be back to back. And at the conclusion of Janet's presentation at 8:15, as Roberto mentioned, we'll address some of the questions that you raised in the chat feature. And he will be monitoring the time that we have together. So all you need to do is sit back, relax, take some notes. If you wish, the webinar is being recorded, so it will be available to you later if you want to go back and catch up on something that you might have missed. But let me offer these words from the book of Romans, from Paul's letter to the Christians in Rome, in which he writes to them some words that may be familiar to you. How are they to call on the one in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in one of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone to proclaim him? And how are they to proclaim him unless they are sent? Our worship, our education, our raising children in the faith, our care for one another can be understood as preparation for mission and our desire to proclaim the one who loves us dearly and walks with us through challenging times. So we are here to assist you in your desire to help with that proclamation. So will you join me in a word of prayer? Gracious and loving God, we thank you for the opportunity we have tonight to be both inspired and calmed for the work that you call us to do. Always inspired because of the good news that you continue to pour into our lives that lifts us up, and calmed that we might know that in the midst of our anxiety, there are ways to do things that continue to look like church, look like Sunday school, look like nursery school, and indeed communicate the good news to those who come to hear and to know what we know. We thank you for Nancy and for Janet for their passion, their expertise, and their willingness to share those things with us tonight. As always, we pray that you would give us open ears and open hearts, that we might find hope for the work that you call us to do, and unity in the fact that you have made us church together. For we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Deacon Nancy.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I hope that you find this helpful. I know there's a lot of anxiety around opening schools, so I look forward to Janet's presentation as well. Just to talk a little bit about how we could do this in a safe manner. So when we think about how we're going to open education and schools, we will think about protecting the health and the safety and the well-being of not just the students, but also the staff, the teachers, the administrators, and the families that the children go home to, that everyone goes home to. So we want to look at promoting behaviors that reduce the spread of COVID-19. We want to look at how we can maintain healthy environments in our schools, maintain healthy operations in our schools, and we really have to think about what to do if someone gets ill while they're in school. So we want to have a plan for that as well. So all of those plans, although there's many guidelines out there, we always have to keep in mind that every place is unique, every place is different. So you're going to think about the guidelines and look at the guidelines and then try to understand and try to fit those guidelines into where you are and how it's going to work best for you. And again, every school is different, every situation is different. And we've learned that in the hospital as well, because we all have guidelines to follow in the hospital, but every place is different. And so you really have to keep that in mind when you're thinking about how you're going to run programs. So also what's going on in your community is important, what's going on around you, because you want to be aware of how much COVID-19 is out there in the community and how people are responding in the community, and you want to be a part of the community. You can't do this in isolation just in your building. So you need to keep that in mind too. Just keep a focus on what's going on around you out there. So, it's interesting because in general, and we've heard this all the time in the news, we hear that children do better for the most part with COVID. They don't seem to have as severe symptoms as the adults have, but we don't want to take that for granted. We want to realize that children do get ill as well. And when children do get ill, many of them do end up in an ICU. So when they get ill, they get very ill. So we don't want to negate that. We don't want to think that children are immune to this, because they're not immune to it. And we also have to keep in mind when we're thinking about schools that, again, there are staff members there who are adults, and adults who some of them have comorbidities. We want to keep in mind that those adults are really susceptible to COVID, and when they get ill, again, they get very ill. So we have to keep all of that in mind when we're thinking about opening schools. And we're looking more and more at what happens to children and adults as they become ill with COVID. We have to think about what kind of program is going to work best for you then, or build. How are you going to reopen schools? And there's lots of data out there that talks about transmission and how we're going to bring all of this together. There's so many things to think about. There's critical services that are provided by schools. So when you think about how are you going to open school, is it going to be in person? Is it going to be online? Is it going to be a combination of those things? We have to keep in mind how it impacts your own community. Again, what's going on in your community. So are there school lunch programs that are very important to the children in that community, where, by doing online learning, or where children are not coming to school, maybe those school lunch programs that are not available to the children, or after school programs, how important are after school programs where you live, where you work. Mental health services, that's another area that schools really are very helpful with. And if school is not in session and children are not going to school, how does that all happen for those families and those children? So we want to think about all of that when we're thinking about how to open school. So just looking at some risks of how COVID spreads, just to look at that, a little bit of the science. So COVID spreads directly or indirectly. So we do know that it's a droplet infection. So what is a droplet infection? That means that when we cough, speak, breathe, sing, these are ways that droplets are expelled, right? Droplets come out. So one way that you can catch that, right? One way that that could be transmitted to us is when we breathe them in. So that's why there's a lot of talk about that social distancing, that 6-foot rule, because when we're within that 6 feet, we could directly breathe in droplets when people cough, speak, breathe, sing, all those ways. So that's a direct way of catching COVID. The other way is indirect transmission. Indirect transmission happens when somebody does those things again, coughs, speaks, breathes, and droplets come out, and they think it may be for as far as 6 feet, which is a pretty good distance, and they land on surfaces. So as droplets land on surfaces, on a table, on wherever you are, then someone else comes along and touches that surface and then handles their face. That's how they breathe them in. So directly by breathing them in directly, and indirectly by droplets that land on surfaces, and then we touch those surfaces, handle our face, and breathe them in. And that's why we do say that, we want to wear protection on our face as source control, but we also want to protect ourselves from not handling our face and breathing in those droplets. So we'll talk a little bit more about not touching our face, and when we do touch our face, to be careful that we perform hand hygiene, because before we do that. So whenever you touch anything or feel that you are in contact with something, children should know it's really important that they perform hand hygiene. So we should have lots of ways that children could perform hand hygiene, very conveniently located for the children. So, and for the adults, we want to make sure that there's plenty of alcohol around. Soap and water is always good, but it's not always as convenient. That's why that push for alcohol hand sanitizer, at least 60%, is it's a big push for that, because we know that it's easier for everybody to use, and at least it's a way that we could safely perform hand hygiene, clean our hands. So we want to keep that in where the kids are working, where they're doing schoolwork, and also where they're playing. We want to have hand hygiene available in playgrounds, in any area where kids are together. We want to make sure that they're able to keep their hands clean. So we want to look at the different kinds of risks that that we have when we're looking at risk factors. There's low risks, where students and teachers are only doing online learning, so that the kids are not at school at all. That's a low risk type situation. And then there's some risk when you have small in-person classes, and lots of schools are doing this, where, I don't know, again, this is going to have to work differently for different people, but some schools are doing it where some kids go to school Monday and Wednesday, and other students go to school Tuesday and Thursday. And when you split the kids up that way, you're providing for space so that the children are not on top of each other, so that they have more the ability not to be, within that 6-foot distance. So by spreading them out that way, that's one way to do it. Again, that's not always easy, and it depends on the community. Again, can parents handle that? How is that kind of a schedule going to work for parents? And when students are sharing objects, when you do things where the students are sharing objects, you have to be careful too that those objects are cleaned and disinfected. Then there's medium risk, where there's regularly scheduled cleaning and disinfection going on, but there's more, most students are participating in the in-person learning. So in this situation, more kids are together in one place. So that's a little bit more of a risk than when you're, really separating them out, where there's only a few children in the classroom. And again, we know that it's not always possible to have just a few children in a classroom. So higher risk is when there's lots of children together, and not as much regularly scheduled cleaning and disinfection. You know, the more cleaning that you could do of those areas and those spaces that the children are in, and regularly scheduled means you actually say every day at this time, we're going to clean that room. That way we know that the room or the area gets cleaned every day. We have found even in the hospital that that works very well. Now, it's one thing to say we want all the doorknobs cleaned once a day, but it's another thing to say we want all the doorknobs cleaned after lunch or at 1 o'clock, between 1 and 3 every day. Then you know that there's somebody assigned to do that at that time. And that's really important when you're trying to keep the place clean and infection, as little infection as possible in the area. And the highest risk is when everybody goes to school and everybody's there. And again, we all know that's a higher risk, but sometimes it is the only situation that works for your community. So that's something that you would all have to decide together again, what's the best way to do that. So we also have to keep in mind that we need to have some emergency operation plans. So EOPs, we have to make sure we have emergency operation plans in place. You never know what's going to happen. You have to prepare for anything to happen. And we have found that in the hospital where you just don't know when something is going to hit, how it's going to hit, how many people are going to be involved in it. Just being prepared for something like that is really the best thing. I would say everybody should be prepared that someone is going to get ill in your school. Someone, teacher, a staff member, a child. Think that someone will get ill, and it may even be more than one person at one time. I think it's really important to keep in mind you're not immune. No one's going to be immune to this, so expect it. And that way you'll be prepared for it. So you need to have a triage area for that where you can, students, that's another thing, kids get nervous. School is opening. This is a new situation again. It's different. Maybe for kids who've done this before, this is a different way of going to school. So they're a little bit nervous. They get stomach aches. So you want to have a triage area where somebody could really look at this and really try to figure out, is this something that we really have to worry about or not? And then an isolation area. So if you find that a student really may have COVID or some illness, even the flu, where you want to keep them away from other students and staff members, have an isolation area in mind, prepare for that. And when can students and staff return after an illness is another piece that we have to be ready for. We have to have a plan for when people can come back to work and when students can come back to school. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that when you have that plan, it works for everyone. So everyone is treated the same way. You don't want to change this. Although the guidelines change, we always want to refer to the guidelines, especially from the state. We want to keep an eye on what the state is telling us to do. But we don't want to look at we're making up rules as we go along for different people either. So we want to make sure that we have plans in place that everybody can follow, that everybody is aware of, so that when children are sick, what is the rule? How are they coming back to school? Do they need to have a COVID test? Do they want, do you want to have a COVID test done? Is there a certain amount of time you want them to be out of school? All of that has to be in place now, really, as soon as school opens. And you want to also develop a protocol for monitoring what's going on out in the community. The guidelines change depending on what's going on out in the community, and it's important to keep on top of it. When the guidelines say, a student has to be out of school for 14 days, then you want to make sure the student is out for 14 days. What is the guideline now, and what is going on in your community? I know right now in the hospital, if you're sick, you're out with COVID, you're out for 10 days. And that's the way it is. Then there's also that quarantine issue that's going on, right? So if somebody visited another state and that state has a high number of COVID cases in that state, then when people come back to New York, they have to be quarantined for 14 days. And it sounds a little silly because if you're sick, you're out for 10 days. If you're quarantining for some other reason, you're out for 14 days. So if you became exposed to COVID by traveling in an area where there's a lot of disease, or maybe you were in close contact with someone with COVID, you should be out of work or school for 14 days. And that's because the incubation period of disease is 14 days. So you don't know if you're going to come down with the disease in that time. Illness ends in 10 days. Actually, they say after 6 days or so, you're shedding very little virus. After 7 days, even less. So by 10 days, you're really not shedding virus at all. But 14 days for quarantining, because you could still become infectious at that time. People are infectious for 2 days before symptoms appear. People could be infectious for 2 days before symptoms appear. That's why that's such a long period of time where you want to keep everybody safe and out of school. Also, what's the best way to share information in your school? So what will happen if somebody in the school does have COVID, does come down with COVID, and now people are going to have to know about that? People are going to have to know who was in close contact. How are you going to get the word out? So make sure that you have a plan for communicating information. I don't know what works best in your schools, but you'll know that. Is it a flyer that you send home with the children? Is there some kind of email that you want to send out if everyone has email? Is there a telephone chain? Whatever works best for you in your schools, you need to have that plan in place. Communication is really important. The less you communicate, the more fear builds. And we've seen that in the hospital too. So always be upfront with what's going on. That's my opinion. Be upfront, be clear, let everybody know what's happening. And that makes people much more comfortable than when people think getting sick. So always have a way to communicate. It's better to hear it from the source about what's happening. Let's see. Developing testing information is another way. How are you going to test people for COVID? I don't know if it's any way that you want to even think about doing that in school, and that's fine if you don't, but what is the plan? Even if it's just having telephone numbers, places where people could go to be tested, it's a good idea to have telephone numbers available so that you could share that with parents and families. You want to make sure that they know how to get tested, especially if you're saying they have to get tested before they come back to school, then you want to have that information for them. You also want to check with local health departments about where the best places are for them to go. And this, unlike when this first started, now there are plenty of places to get tested. So, and I think that there's been a pretty response to that. If something happens in a community, local hospitals set up areas right away. So it's really a pretty good way to get tested. But you just have to keep track of what's going on in your community, and they'll help you figure out what to do if something in your community happens. Also, you want to make sure that kids with special needs have everything in place that they need. It's really tricky, I think, for students with disabilities, with these masks that everybody has to wear. And I'm hearing, I don't know, from people in the community and even where I work, talking about their kids, that they're adjusting pretty well. The kids are adjusting pretty well to the masks, but it does, we do think about children who have difficulty hearing, even children who are deaf. How do we do this with a mask on as a teacher? How are the kids going to be able to understand what's going on? They do have masks that have a clear area over the mouth, so that if for children who are deaf, you can wear a mask and the child could still see your lips moving, and so they could better understand what you're saying. It's just another thought that if you're teaching children with special needs, you may want to think about what are their needs and what do you need in place, for those special needs children. What is it that's going to help them? And then we want to make sure that we're promoting good behaviors among everyone, staff, families, children. We want to teach everybody about close contact. What does close contact mean? So for the record, close contact, it means if you are within 6 feet of someone for at least 15 minutes. So if you're without wearing your PPE, if you are within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes, without wearing PPE, that's a close contact. Those are the people that would need to be quarantined if someone became ill in school. So you would have to almost create a list of those people. And the Department of Health is going to help you with that, because you're going to have to report it. And they're going to help you figure out who needs to be home and who can come back to school. So we want to teach the staff also to be real careful about this. Keep in mind, if you're going to be near someone for that amount of time, make sure that you do have on the PPE that you need. PPE is personal protective equipment, sorry. So masks, make sure that you have that on, because if you don't, then you should be quarantining for 14 days. And believe me, your staff could dwindle down very quickly if something like that happens. So you want to make sure that everybody is aware of how to protect themselves and what they need to do so that that doesn't happen. Also, if they've been sick with COVID, when they should come back to school safely so that they're not infecting anybody else. Again, the travel has been a very big issue, and people don't even to talk about it when they're traveling. But if we could just get this point across to everybody in our families, in the schools, it's really important to be honest about this, because we don't want to bring COVID back from another area to our area. We don't want to do that. It really would be devastating to the person if they realize that they're the ones that brought that back to school and that so many people got ill. So that's one way of approaching it, trying to get that across. Hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette, these are other ways to keep people safe. Again, hand hygiene should be performed for at least 20 seconds. So whether you're using soap and water or alcohol hand sanitizer, both work well. Both can take care of this germ, but it should be for at least 20 seconds. So it's not just a quick rinse under the water. We really want to make sure that we get a good hand hygiene. The most important thing that we could do, probably. We should also have receptacles around for tissues, things like this. So we want the children and the staff to use tissues, right? We want them to do that, but we need to have receptacles close by, because, kids don't always, we don't want them throwing tissues on the floor and other people getting into them. So we want to make sure that when kids are using tissues that they have a receptacle to take care of that. And masks are important for source control. So what is source control? Is that if I have the virus, as I'm speaking and breathing, and I may not even know. Remember, we said that I could be contagious for even 2 days before. Thank you. 2 days before that virus, before I show symptoms, so I could be shedding that virus. So it is really important to have source control, keep the virus in. And masks are a very good way to do that. We want to make sure that people understand why we're wearing a mask. Actually, the mask with the little vent on the side, is not the best mask to wear for source control. And, I'm sure you've seen them, the ones that have the little opening where air comes out. Some people do like them, but it's not a good source control. And that's because it's emitting particles to the opening. Source control means we don't want to do that. We don't want to emit particles through the mask. So we want to make sure that people are wearing, the cloth masks are fine for schools, they're fine, but try not to get ones with little valves. And whenever you're going to touch your mask, you should wash your hands. So if you have to, especially the outside of your mask could be contaminated. And I know kids touch their masks a lot. If teachers notice that kids are doing that, just trying to point out to them that they should wash their hands, and staff as well. And also, we don't put masks on people who can't remove them. So masks should not be placed on children who are younger than 2 years old. We shouldn't put a mask on anyone who has difficulty breathing, or anyone who's not able to remove their mask on their own. So for some students, that could be, a challenge. Kids with disabilities, or, who are not able to take that mask off. We have to find another way. There's plexiglass things there. There's other things we could do Teachers can wear masks, but we can't put a mask on somebody who's not able to safely be safe in the mask and remove it. Let's see what else. We also want to think about children who have English as a second language. That's another time where you may want to think about using a mask that has a clear area over the mouth so that the students could see what we're saying besides hearing what we're saying, because it's difficult if you don't speak the language to understand. And it's difficult for us to understand who do speak the language with a regular mask on. So for kids who have difficulty, that it's even more hard. It's even more difficult. And the face shields, I know that there's a lot of talk of face shields. The CDC really recommends the masks rather than the face shields. So for normal everyday activities, really the masks are better. Again, if there's an issue with a child who wear a mask or something, then you may want to put a shield on as well. But believe me, to wear all of this all day long is not easy. So let's go with what we can really do. And the mask is something that, you believe it or not, you will get used to it. You'll after a while you just forget you're wearing it, believe it or not. So just practicing and also role modeling for the children. So if the staff is doing it, that's going to help the children to do it as well. If the staff is not being compliant, then that's not going to help either. Post signs, lots of visuals for the kids and the staff. Those are good reminders, as the day goes on, really good reminders. And of course, we're looking at age appropriate type signs and language appropriate type signs. So, your communities, what the language is in the area, and you know how old the kids are. So you're going to posting signs with pictures is helpful. I do that for adults. It's a nice, quick visual. When you can see pictures on the sign, it's just a quick reminder that you should have a mask on, that you should use a tissue. There's lots of visuals on the CDC website. If you look it up, you could even print them out. They're free and they come in different languages. So you can look on the CDC website for different kinds of signs and messages that you can give. Again, it's going to be what works best to communicate in your school community. What's the best way to do that in your school community? You also want to maintain a healthy environment. So especially areas that are high risk areas where lots of germs could spread. So your school health office is one area where that really should be cleaned and disinfected regularly. The cots where you sit down in those areas, the whole office really needs to be cleaned at least daily. Lunchrooms, make sure that you clean and disinfect the lunch tables at least once a day. Athletic rooms, so if kids are playing on mats and things like that, those need to be cleaned regularly. Any equipment that is shared, what we call shared equipment, really has to be cleaned regularly before the next child uses it. So any equipment that's going to be shared must be cleaned and disinfected between each use. And any frequently touched surfaces. So I mentioned before the doorknobs. We have found, doorknobs have a lot of germs. Elevator buttons have a lot of germs. I don't know how many of you have elevators in your schools, but doorknobs, make sure that they're on a regularly cleaning schedule, because otherwise people don't think of that. Even custodians are not going to think about going around and cleaning the doorknobs if it's not part of a schedule routine that they're asked to do. And always follow the product guidelines when you're cleaning and disinfecting. Lots of people always ask, how do we clean it? How long does that take? Or every product that you pick up, if you read the label, it's going to tell you how long it should take to clean it. There's disinfectant wipes out there that take 2 minutes. It says right on there, it takes 2 minutes for this product to work. If it says on a container that the wet time or the contact time for that product is 2 minutes, that means that the surface has to stay wet with that product for 2 minutes. This is a really difficult thing to get across, but a really important one. I tell people, if it says 2 minutes and it's only wet for 1 minute, you're just dusting. You're not really killing anything. So make sure whatever the product says that contact time is, you stick to. If you take a wipe and wipe a cot in a health office and it's dry in 1 minute, take another wipe and wipe it again, making sure that that 2-minute rule is followed. Some of them say 4 minutes. So you really have to get the product. Try to pick the products that don't take 4 minutes. So and you don't need Clorox bleach. You don't need Clorox wipes. Clorox takes longer to dry, and the fumes are a little bit difficult for some people to inhale. So I would try to stay away from it. It's not necessary to use bleach. Those the regular disinfectants that you use in the schools work fine on this virus. So I would stick with those. And make sure they're stored properly. Of course, you don't want the children to get into those disinfectants.
Nancy, it's 7:40. You have 5 more minutes.
Okay. Let me see what else. So ventilation is a good thing. Make sure that when you can, use some ventilation, open windows when you can. If you're using fans, be careful that you're not spreading germs with the fans. So using an exhaust fan in a window where you're pulling good air into the room is not a bad idea, but you don't want to aim fans at people where you're pushing germs across the room. So just think about how you're using the fans. And there's other things you can buy, like HEPA filters. Again, I don't know what your budget is like, but there are ways that you can enhance the ventilation in different classrooms. If you don't have air conditioning, there's other things that you could look into. Make sure that water fountains are disinfected on a regularly scheduled basis. Again, don't expect that someone's going to think of that if it's not on a schedule. Barriers that you could put up at reception desks are a good idea too. If this is where everyone comes in and speaks to the secretary every day, you want to make sure that you have a barrier there so that everyone is not breathing in her face. Think about how the space is used in the classroom. So rather than having children face each other, maybe all the chairs could face the front of the room, because again, the more that you're breathing at someone, the higher the chance that you're going to spread germs that way. So think about how you're setting up your classroom that way. Lunch, lots of schools are doing lunch in classrooms rather than in large group areas like a cafeteria. So maybe think about different ways that you could serve lunch. See, we talked about some schedules. I'm trying to think of what else I have because I only have a couple of minutes here. Oh, Zoom meetings, things like that. So if you're going to have a PTA meeting or you're going to have a faculty meeting, think about using Zoom. Teach people how to do it so that you're not on top of each other in a room at a meeting. That's never good. If you do have to have meetings in a large group, 6 feet. Everyone should have a mask on. Everyone should be 6 feet apart. Really important, because in a large group gathering, those are the most dangerous. You really want to be careful if you're doing something like that. Always have a point of contact person designated so that there's one person, maybe you have a school nurse, someone who could be in charge of who's going to communicate the information correctly. You want one person who could disseminate information, one person that parents could call, one person that the staff could look to. Okay, and that usually is the school nurse, but if you don't have a school nurse, make sure you have somebody that you can rely on that knows how to get information from the right place. And again, always a plan. If someone is going to get ill, make sure that everybody knows what that plan is. If you're the teacher in the room, you need to know, where do I take this child who's ill? How do I take care of this? Put a mask on yourself, a mask on the student. Keep 6 feet distance when you're taking the student to the nurse's office. Think that the child could have COVID. You have to think that way. And also try to get people to self-report when they're ill. We do want to have a system where teachers, staff members are not going to feel that they're going to be in trouble for calling in sick. We really don't want people to come to work ill, because that's how they spread germs. So make sure that they understand right now, this is not the time to come to school if you're ill. Children or staff members should not do that. recognize the signs and symptoms of COVID. I know you all know them. They're all over the place. Seems to me that that loss of sense of taste and smell is, is really a big one, where it's really unique to COVID. So if somebody is saying that they can't smell or taste something, that's a pretty significant sign. But the respiratory symptoms and all those things, diarrhea is another one. Fever, diarrhea, loss of sense of taste or smell, respiratory symptoms. Those are the things you want to just be on top of if you see that. Always be prepared that somebody may be sick, know what to do if that happens. Notify the authorities if you need to. Make sure that, again, you have a point person who will do that. Again, you want to alert administration. So whoever your administration is, you want to make sure that before you call authorities, they're aware of it, so that that's not a surprise to them. And screening for staff. Make sure that you, however you want to do that, if it's self-screening at home, many different places are doing many different things, but make sure that you are letting people know that before they come to work, they should be healthy when they get there. And I think it's 7:45, so I should stop here.
It is. Wow. Thank you, Nancy. That was tremendous. What a huge amount of information. Some of this you will have to think down to the Sunday school level for those of you who are thinking in that direction, but all of this is applicable. If you have questions, you can use the chat feature and we can get clarification for that later. And don't forget that we're going to record this and make it available to you. So if some of that stuff just like flew by you, you can take a look at it later. But Nancy, thanks so much. That was really, really helpful. Janet, let's turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you tonight. One thing that I would like to reinforce is that I think events like this are important so that people know that they are not alone, and that many of us are having all sorts of challenges trying to deal with life as we know it right now. And so that is something that I think we have to keep in mind through the whole presentation. So Claire, if you want to, I can do it from my computer. Okay.
It's right here. If you can look at the, okay.
Okay, should I cue you if I need to advance or?
Absolutely. Okay. I'll try to follow along, but yes, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. I included this because I kind of thought it's nice to see what school used to look like, and hopefully will look like again. And there were so many unknown factors starting school in September, that all through the summer, people were working to try to sort it all out. Again, this may or may not be what's going to happen if you return to school in a regular way. Next slide, please. One of the things I've noticed is that anxiety has increased exponentially. Anxiety is at the root of so many behaviors. As I've noted some of the things that I've been hearing from the people I see or talk to, many of these have been ongoing since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's very difficult some days to manage these feelings because there are a tremendous amount of related feelings to anxiety. And for children especially, they aren't able necessarily to articulate what is going on for them. So we, as the adults, have to kind of read between the lines, if you will, to understand what the need might be. Next one, please. On this slide, for informational purposes, I listed As of 9/13/20, what the Johns Hopkins University stats are, and as you can see, that there have been almost a little more than 6.5 million cases in the US and 193, almost 194,000 deaths in the US. New York State, we fared, we were the highest state in the country at this point because of population density, I believe. So that is something that is startling to read when I saw that. And it's throughout the world. If you look at the figures, you can see that it is a pandemic that we have very little control over. And all we can do is really, as Nancy so aptly reported, is pay attention to our own little community, our own world, and do what is right to keep yourselves protected and others. Next slide, please. A few more statistics regarding what's changed since the pandemic began. In mental health, there's increases in symptoms of anxiety disorders and depressive disorders. It's increased considerably in the period between April and June, and I'm suspecting that hasn't really changed. If anything, it might have increased. Substance use and abuse has increased. Suicidal ideation was significantly higher for respondents 18 to 24. Minority, racial, and ethnic groups are having high incidence of suicidal ideation, and caregivers, paid and unpaid, are having a particularly difficult time because the caseload for the nurses I speak to sometimes can be overwhelming. The lack of protective equipment, there's so many issues, and it's, again, we don't know what the future will hold. In this survey, 40.9% of those surveyed reported an adverse mental or behavioral health condition. That is a large number of people right now. I've heard numbers as high as 60%. Traumatic stress is basically what happens when a traumatic event occurs in your life and you can't stop thinking about it, and you're worried about it, and you're having difficulty coping with it. And those have increased too. I don't think we should forget that trauma has been a big part of how we're responding emotionally to the pandemic, because so much is unpredictable. Next one, please. Okay. How do we adapt to change? I think that's been a challenge long before the pandemic began. But it's my belief that since the pandemic began, we're dealing with so many changes, and the unpredictability of what will remain afterwards, what will change, creates anxiety for people. So how do we adapt? We have to keep things simple, even when the world seems very complicated, which to me it does very much so right now. Try to keep a positive attitude. Think of some ways that life has improved since the pandemic began. That's been a way for me to cope, especially on the days that it feels like nothing will, some feelings of hopelessness or helplessness or loss of empowerment. And that has been helpful to know, to think about and write down sometimes what have been some of the benefits. What comes to my mind is having more family time and having more time. I love not having to commute on Long Island. I know that's been a plus for me. And getting more time if you are able to do those things that you choose to do. Some people are not, and I don't want to assume everyone has more time. Stay active mentally and physically, and each day engage in some mental or physical exercise. Eat healthy meals and snacks. Try to learn better time management. That's challenging for me too. Next one. Okay. I've heard many people discuss the fact that they're creating time now for new activities or activities they used to like to do but haven't had time to do. And I think that that's a way to distract your mind from the intensity of what's going on. Be open to learning new things. That's been certainly a good tool for people to use to distract themselves from the everyday stress with this pandemic. Appropriate amounts of sleep. You want to monitor how your sleep patterns are. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you waking up? And the reality is that sleep patterns have been off for many people. Insomnia, or sleeping too much, or not getting enough REM sleep. So that has been common. Limit alcohol and drugs. Sometimes we use those things to numb the feelings that we have. But I think we have to pay attention to that fact. Are we doing that or not? Seek out social and emotional support. I know there have been days where I don't even want to seek out anyone because I'd rather just isolate in my own little space. When I can, and I know when I need to, because these feelings of anxiety and depression sometimes have to be managed by getting support outside of myself. And so that can be important. Social interaction can happen via Zoom and small group. I have not engaged in too many outside activities, and so in a social way, but I've done a lot of Zoom or other types of platforms that you can see your friends and interact with your friends or family. Try to maintain a flexible routine. Routine is helpful, but I think if you get too focused on doing it exactly right, you're going to get even more frustrated. And I find that that's why a routine is good, but have some flexibility built into that routine. The beach, a quiet place with the family, has been what I'm reading and experiencing, an important place for people to go. It's outdoors, it's a little safer than being indoors, but we do have to be mindful about the people around us. I generally don't go to the beach on the weekend because I know it's too crowded, but maybe you have to choose off hours to go or find a beach that's not as congested as some others can be. But sunset watching is a great pastime. I love to do that, and that's what inspired me with this picture. Okay. Now, we're talking about, certainly the beginning of the program, we were talking about managing the lives for the people around us. One of the ways we do that is to figure out how to manage our own anxiety, because I believe that many people are having anxious feelings, but may or may not be able to identify that, because sometimes it masquerades as another action that, and there's so many: fear, anger, disruption of behaviors for children. And every family around the country is facing new and difficult situations. That's been the common theme that I've been hearing around the country, that what do we do now? How do we do it? What can we do? What can't we do? My kids are driving me crazy because they're getting bored, and I'm getting bored, and I want to reach out. So it is new and difficult. There's not one right decision in any circumstance. Many people have to do what's right for them, themselves, and their own family, because we have various factors involved in your family. You might have someone living with you that has a compromised immune system, or it fits into some of the high-risk categories. And you have to decide what is right for you and your family. Trust your instincts. Excuse me one second. Trust those instincts. You know your family best. You know your children best. Listen to that gut feeling. Listen to the inner voice. And, you know, I like to think of it as God's whispers in my ear when I'm not paying attention to being still. And so I encourage you to trust yourself during these times. Establish and maintain communication with school personnel and your child's teacher. As Nancy said, that's going to be critical right now, because communication is of the utmost importance. Many districts I've explored do have improved methods of communication online, via email, and do have a person in school. You want to align yourself, and under normal circumstances, I would tell families, you want to have a person in school that you can help if your child, or that can help you if your child needs help. And right now, that is your social workers, psychologists, each school is doing that a little differently as far as whether they're there every day of the week. So you have to explore in your own school district, and you can find that information on the school district's website. Okay. Just so you know, teachers, parents, and children, I'm sorry, are normally anxious when a new school year starts. And what I've learned as a mom and as a teacher and as a counselor, that sometimes we adults struggle more than the children when circumstances change. Of course, there are children that have a very hard time adapting to the new way school is run. I've heard, though, from other children that they're glad to be going back to school so that they can keep those connections that they have. And, most schools have modified attendance or have created hybrid situations so that it can be done in a safe manner. Important point. We have to accept that there are certain things we can't control, even when we want to. We have to learn how to be a little more flexible. And for me personally, I use the Serenity Prayer. You might be familiar with that, and other prayers when I need to remind myself that I can't do anything regarding what other people say or do. I have to deal with it, perhaps in an assertive way, let my feelings be known, or separate myself from that situation, or think of another way to deal with it and handle it. Become more flexible with change. That's hard to do, but I think it's one of the things that can help us survive these next couple of months or whatever it's going to be, because change is most likely to happen. Next slide. I love this picture because to me, it reminds me of the good things that have been happening. Dads are able to spend more time if they're able to work from home. And, you know, I know that's not true for every parent, but I like the fact that we are interacting with our children and teaching them simple things like hand washing and how to do that. Families are engaging more so with one another. They're irritating one another also, but I think that this can be a start for a new way of being as a family. Enjoy time with your children, grandchildren, and pets. Simple activities can help us stay connected to one another. Pets have been a great source of comfort for many people. Whatever kind of pet you have or pets you like. I've also done some virtual visits with animals around the world. And there are many websites that one of the things I've been doing is watching the gorillas in the Congo, which is not something I probably would have been able to do otherwise. The panda at the Smithsonian Institute or this Washington Zoo has a webcam that you can watch the baby getting raised. A new baby apparently was born. So consider that virtual trips around the world. And little hour-long lectures have been something that I've used to distract myself. Be self-aware. Acknowledge if you're hungry, if you're angry, lonely, tired, and satisfy that need. Because that's sometimes what can precede a meltdown of some sort, whether it's with an adult or a child. And so be mindful of that. And also remember that human beings are adaptable and resilient. It doesn't always feel like that, but I know that in my experience, when I've had to struggle with some things, there were always lessons to be learned that I could choose to apply in my future. Next one, please. Try to avoid catastrophic thinking. Often, some of us go to the worst case scenarios, and we think that that's a way to plan for the future. And, you know, to a degree, we want to plan for the future. But if you're spending most of the day thinking about all the worst things that can happen to you today or this week or this month, generally you're going to run into problems at some point. And it takes discipline and effort to learn how to do that. And we do that by distracting ourselves with those things that bring us pleasure. Maybe a walk around the block, in your yard. I love to garden, so I get outside and try to do some pulling of weeds, which is kind of reconnects me to the earth. Music, writing letters. I'm back to writing more letters than I did before. Writing is a great way. Maintain social contacts in a safe way that works for your family. And you have to be assertive if what you're seeing is not really what you're feeling comfortable with. We can reach out in virtually or small gatherings while following the appropriate safety protocols. I've done some of that. I know the people I know who think similarly to me, and those are the people I really choose to be around. I have been attending church online, and I am getting used to that. And one thing I do like is I can sit with my coffee cup while I'm having church in the morning. So there are, again, some positive pieces of this. Start a conversation regarding your concerns about interacting with others and find out what their thoughts are. Someone mentioned to me today about how they had gone to a store and were wearing their masks, and another person online was refusing to wear the masks, and that person turned around to them and berated them for using a mask. Now that can be very complex. I'm reading more about businesses being afraid to say something, but again, you have to find your comfort zone in dealing with that. That's one of the reasons I personally avoid the stores, because I don't want to deal with that, because it's more than my brain can handle. Next, please. For the simple days. I'm a former preschool teacher, and over the course of the summer, I wondered, how are 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds going to maintain distance? Because that's what preschool teaching is often about, creating a safe and secure environment. I've been talking to my friends and in our church school and other schools. And of course, it's only 1 or 2 weeks into the school year. And so far, they've been able to maintain a routine. There have been changes and paying attention to the individual needs of children. I remember when I was a teacher, the first 6 weeks of school, there were some children that had terrible separation anxiety. And that, the way I used to handle that was to give them some kind of comfort. It might mean a hand on the shoulder, or just giving them, a hug, or see what the need is of the children. Now we're limited with that. So I'm continuing to find out more about what's working and what's not working. Next slide, please. Practice setting limits and boundaries that work for you. You have to be aware of what's working in your life and say no if you need to, and don't do things to please other people. Plan time to take a break from your work activities. I get compelled to work, when I'm preparing for something like this, I'm working for 3 or 4 hours straight. Today I said, stop, go sit outside, do some reading, pick a few tomatoes, and relax and pray. Because every time before I start, I ask God to help and guide me. And that's why I love doing programs for people of faith, because I can share that with them. Sometimes we can simply taking a deep breath can stop that crazy thinking that we have, that it feels like your mind is on a hamster wheel and you don't know what to do next. And of course, prayer and meditation is a practice that I try to engage in daily. And meditation doesn't have to look in a particular way. There are many resources online. Mindfulness, which I'll talk about in the next slide, or the next bullet point, is a scientifically proven way to lessen our stress and anxiety. We know that those two factors can influence our health, physical health. So we really want to pay attention. There are many resources online now, and what I love is that the things I used to pay for, I'm now getting for free, including exercise and yoga, yoga. And there's a website called Silver Sneakers, which focuses on exercise for older Americans. And I'm enjoying that because I can do it at home and I don't have to feel guilty about not going to the gym. Be aware of your own recurring sleep, mood, or appetite changes. And seek professional help if you need it. Never feel that it's wrong to ask for help. It can be difficult to ask for help, and sometimes difficult to know who to ask for help. That's why organizations like Lutheran Counseling Center exist, because we can provide resources and referrals. New York State has wonderful websites that we can access to help with, and I'm going to list some of those at the end of the presentation, that you can get daily contact if you want about what's going on in your part of the state. And I find it's quite good for me. I can be a worrier, and if I see it in black and white, that lessens my anxiety.
Janet, sorry to interrupt. You have 5 more minutes.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm gonna kind of run. How many more slides do I have? I don't know what number we're on. Okay, yeah, we're towards the end. Thank you. Irritability seems to be a common experience that people are having at this point in time. I know there are only 2 of us in our house, my husband and myself, and most of the time things are okay. But of course, there are times that you're getting on each other's nerves. So one of the things that we make a regular practice is just stepping outdoors. Sometimes we walk together, sometimes we walk individually, but we try to break that tension by just doing something different than what we're involved with. Encourage an attitude of gratitude for the blessings that you do have. We forget that sometimes. I am blessed to be able to go outdoors and not be worried about my safety or being infected or just knowing I have space in my home and outside of my home. That helps me deal with the frustrations I have. My husband's a joker, so he's able to find humor in everyday life situations, and he makes me laugh because he's really good at it. And I do read, some of my friends are really good. I'm not so great at telling jokes, but I do get some subscriptions to humorous websites to help me learn to lighten up. Took me a long time to figure that one out. Please, 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 limit the time you spend on social media and mobile phones. It can be deadly for our mental health because it's so easy to get addicted, if you will, to, spending time listening to the news or what channel to watch or who's going to say what today and how's that going to change 20 minutes from now. So for me, I've chosen to have kind of a news blackout, if you will. I stay informed to the best of my ability, but if things get too intense politically, emotionally, I have to step back because that's the only way I can maintain my own levels of relaxation. Very important too, be sure the information you're hearing in the media and elsewhere is accurate. We all know how people talk about things that, may or may not be true based on sources that are not always reliable. So be informed. And I know I'm checking my own clock. We can go through these fairly quickly. That's what I love. I hope we'll be able to do that again. I love swinging on the swings when we get to the park. This is just a little piece that helps you learn tips for setting priorities this school year, whether it's in the school or with your families, and you'll be able to that will be part of what I'm leaving with Roberto. This is a very good booklet that's available for free if you're working with children in churches or schools that you can get print online if you'd like. It's rather long, but you can certainly access one copy and print it out. The information to do that is on the next slide. It's copyrighted, but I have gone to this site and you can get, it's basically looks like a coloring book, but it's very good about explaining at the level of children that they can understand. Next slide, please. This is another resource that has been, again, a free resource provided by National Traumatic Institute. No, let's see, I have that name wrong. It's on my resource list, and the next slide will show you how to get it. Okay, we can just go through the next few slides. It's really the resource slides. I've provided some of the resources I've used in other webinars because I listed other websites that are useful. Many websites today have COVID-19 pages, including the Synod office. Very helpful. Next one, please. This is another group of, when I do a webinar, I review the literature, and every day, every week, there's new things that are coming out related to what's going on in that moment. And for this presentation today, these were the sources that I consulted with. If I haven't touched on anything, please look at the resource lists, because there's a lot of information that may be applicable to your circumstances that I haven't covered. And much of it, anything here is free. List of important phone numbers and websites. As I said, New York State offers some numbers. You can continue. That can be available. Another New York State numbers, connect numbers. Just want to mention the Aunt Bertha website. That's a new one to me. That is basically a resource that anyone can use across New York State, and it provides lots of information in many areas that we need to help with: homelessness, food, medical care. So I would suggest, if you need that, just to consult with AuntBertha.com. And in conclusion, this was the verse that came to me. As you can see, I'll leave it. I know I'm over time, so I'm not going to read it, but if you choose, Dietrich Bonhoeffer certainly faced some difficulties during his time, and so I find his words quite inspirational. And waiting has been very, very difficult, and wondering. So I thought that these were words that we could process. And the last page is basically my contact information, and I can be reached. You can send an email to me directly. That's my cell phone number, and the number on the website and phone number underneath is the information for the Lutheran Counseling Center, which is based in Mineola, but has sites all throughout the metropolitan area, in the boroughs and in New York. So if that's any way we can help, even if you need to call the office and get a list of how to help. New York City has some great resources also. Okay, thank you so much for giving me that few minutes extra.
Well done, Janet. Thank you. When you started out and started to talk about some of the results of the virus on our mental and emotional health, I got a little nervous, but you really brought it around to some positive, encouraging words. Love the part about resilience and things we could do to take care of ourselves. Thank you both. I understand we do have some questions, so I'm going to turn it over to Roberto. And Roberto, as you mentioned those questions, maybe you can also share with us when this webinar might be available on our website.
Absolutely. So we're going to try to make this webinar available in our website this week, and we're going to share it in our weekly email as well. So please keep opening your weekly emails. I know you all are doing that every single time we send an email. Thank you for that. And it's going to be published in our YouTube channel as well. Remember to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And after that commercial, a question that is related to that is if we're going to publish the PDF of the presentation, Janet, and we can definitely do that if we have your approval.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question, and this might be for our bishop. Is there any financial aid for church schools to help cover the expenses for preparing the buildings?
Yes, there is. We set aside some of our resources to help congregations and schools do that. The person you need to get in touch with for that is your particular deployed assistant. That is one of my assistants who's responsible for your geographical area. If you don't know who that might be, you can always send an email to my Executive Assistant Deacon Gail Ruge. It's G Ruge, G-R-U-E-G-E at mnys.org. And she can connect you to your deployed assistant to get application for financial support and loans.
Thank you, Bishop.
You're welcome.
Another question, should we expect our children to be acting out? How can we identify their behavior as a response to anxiety? How do we speak with them about this?
Okay. I think we can pretty much accept across the board that children are going to be acting out. That's one of the ramifications of the change at high level of anxiety. I know in my family, I check in with my son, and some days are better than others. But I think one way we can relate is by, first of all, getting down to their level so that you can speak to them, make eye contact. Find appropriate time. You know, when everybody is stressed out is not the time to talk about anything. Kids need to know that they're going to be safe, and that you're going to guide them in that process. So using those two booklets that I mentioned at the end have all sorts of ways to communicate with even the younger, I would say for 3 or 4 years old and up. So utilize, there's other books, other stories, play is the way children learn. So act it out, role play. I know in art, the groups I know about doing things online, like having scavenger hunts and, you know, coffee hours, etc., just to stay connected.
Perfect. Thank you. I think this question is for you, Nancy. If a child is diagnosed with COVID and was in a preschool class or a Sunday school class, are all in the class required to quarantine?
Yeah, so that's the tough part. When you're in a crowd like that, anybody who's been within 6 feet of that child for at least 15 minutes, if they're not both wearing masks the whole time, will have to be quarantined. I know that there's many situations where this has happened, where there's a group in one area and they do get quarantined. Yes.
Thank you. Another question. Any concerns about the lack of socialization for our children? What is the consequences of this for our kids, and how do we help them?
Okay, several of the articles that I've noted have specific information about that. In general, I'm going to say, excuse me, that is one of the things that's happening. We're worried about them socializing, but remember, kids are resilient. You can walk around the neighborhood, you can wave from a distance, you can, you know, if you know a family around you that's okay with setting up play dates, that's, of course, with social distance, you might be able to try that. Kids do need social, especially the younger children, which is who are the children I'm more concerned about. But the people I know that are involved with nursery school are managing in this moment. But as we all know, anything could change at any point in time. But try to read some of those articles, and there's quite a few related to that, or do a Google search and you'll find more information.
Perfect, thank you. Any recommendations in how to teach people to wear masks correctly?
I give that to Nancy.
Right. So to wear a mask correctly, you want to teach everybody, even the children, they should wash their hands, then put the mask on. Try not to touch it after it's on. It should always cover their nose and their mouth. So I always tell people, over your nose, under your chin. That's the way I tell people to wear a mask. If I want to remind them, it's, you know, when I see them and I want to be kind of light about it, I'll just say, over your nose, under your chin. And then again, they shouldn't be handling it. So if you could teach them not to handle it once it's on.
Right. With regards to the travel advisory, Is it necessary to quarantine for 14 days if upon return to New York, you have a COVID test and it is negative?
Good question. So I get that a lot. Yes, it is. So the idea is when you come back, you can have a COVID test that's negative, but that incubation period is 2 to 14 days. So even if I just came back from California today and my COVID test today or tomorrow is negative, that means I don't have COVID today. But that incubation, I could get COVID 7 days from now because the incubation period is 14 days. It takes that long before we know whether or not we're going to get sick with the virus. So 14 days, yes.
Thank you. Yeah. We have a couple of more questions, but I noticed that it's 8:30. So just so you know, we're going to try to publish answers to those questions in our website and then make that available to you via email.
Great. Thank you, Roberto. I hope this has been helpful to all of you. A lot of information, but again, you can access it again. But thanks for the ministry and the work that you all are doing. And Nancy, Janet, we're going to give you a Zoom round of applause, which you won't even hear, but please know that we're very grateful for both of you and your sharing with us tonight.
You're very welcome. My
help.
pleasure.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Absolutely. And before you go, I will bless you all on your way. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. God's blessings.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.